Thanks, Gina. Wow, good morning again. All those smiling faces on the Hollywood squares. Yes, indeed. Wow. Well, the title of my talk is Let's Use the Good China. Let's use the good China. And the main theme of it is, looking at this power of love that we have in our life and how are we using this mental power, this mental faculty of love for others in our life and for ourselves. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity Movement, identified these 12 mental faculties, 12 powers that we have that make up the Christ of our being. And he identified each of these 12 powers with a disciple or an apostle of Jesus, and also located them in a particular area in our body. And for the power of love, he identified the apostle John, who was called the disciple whom Jesus loved. And he located in our heart center. So tomorrow, as we celebrate this special day, Valentine's Day, a day to set aside to remember and honor those that are closest to us that we love. So let's think about how are we showing up and expressing this love in our life to not only that special person, but to ourselves as well. And we can do this by staying in the now, as somebody just alluded to and previously. And we can use this by this, let's use the good China idea. Now, we have a saying in Unity that God is love. God is omnipresent. In fact, we use that statement this morning from our bulletin about there's one presence and one power active in the universe and in my life. Reverend Dr. Tom Shepard, who was one of my ministerial students, ministerial instructors, I was his student, Tom used to always call it OP2. See, he was prior military, so acronyms come easy. OP2, one presence, one power, OP2. And Eric Butterworth, the long-term minister, said that there is not one spot where God is not. As I was getting ready for this talk, I found a couple stories, as a matter of fact, two stories that kind of point to there's a presence somewhere, and it may not be particularly obvious, but it's there. And the first one took place in November of 1971 in London. There was a young man, he was an architect, he was very successful, but he was depressed. And this young man decided he was going to take his life. So he made his way down to the London subway, pushed his way through the crowd, and he was waiting for the subway train to come around. And as the train came around the curve, he jumped in front of the train. Well, the engineer was shocked and he threw on the brakes, and all of a sudden, that it didn't stop in time, but the first car kind of caught this young man, and all of a sudden the train came to a screeching halt. And he was amazed at how this thing happened. Back in the last car of this train, the transit workers as a transit officer, had seen this man walk over and pull the emergency brake on the last car, which locks all the wheels of this subway car. They arrested him, and when they realized that his pulling the emergency brake stopped the train, the young man was okay. They had to get special jacks and so to lift it up to get him out from underneath, but he was not killed and he was unhurt. So when the transit authorities found out that this man had pulled the emergency brake and actually saved the life of this, and when they're questioning him, they're saying, why did you pull the emergency brake? He had no idea. He said he just had this uncontrollable urge to walk over and pull the emergency brake. And by doing that, he saved the young man's life. So is that odd? Or is that God? The second story takes place also in England. William Dixon was a widower, had lost his only son. And he happened to look out of his house one day and he noticed that his neighbor's house was on fire. So he ran on over, and the older woman who had lived in there, she had been evacuated, and she was saying her young grandson was still up in the house. So William Dixon climbed up the side of the house using this iron pipe, got in there, rescued the son, and let the son reunite with his grandmother. Well, it wasn't a short time later that this woman passed away. And the town council was wondering, who's going to care for this young boy? Well, two volunteers stepped forward at the town council. One was a man who had lost his only son as well. And then William Dixon stood up. He didn't have to say a word. He just showed his burned hand from him crawling up that pipe, and he was awarded custody of this young man. So, is that odd, or is that God? A man pulls an emergency brake, saves a life. Another man crawls up the side of a house, burns his hands, and gets to take care of this young fellow who we had rescued. So is that odd, or is that God? Florence Scovel Shinn, a New Thought writer from the 1920s, who had self-published her own book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And in a chapter entitled The World of the Wondrous, and I'm thinking wondrous, remember this is a 1920s book, so some of the verbiage is probably a little dated, but wondrous means so good and admirable as to inspire wonder or awe. So good or admirable as to inspire wonder or awe. So Florence had written in this book about love, and she says, love is the cosmic phenomena that opens to man the fourth dimensional world. Love is the cosmic phenomenon and opens to man the fourth dimensional world. Now, the fourth dimension is one of Mr. Fillmore's favorite topics. And actually, the fourth dimension includes the other three, and it's the spiritual dimension, moving beyond the world into this thing, these things that happen, like that, pulling the emergency brake, crawling up the side of the house and rescuing a kid. Our own Revealing Word, which is the book that has the metaphysical definitions, these various terms, defines love as this, saying, pure essence of being that binds together the whole human family. The pure essence of being that binds together the whole human family. So love is this thing that binds us together. In English language, you only have one word for love. Love. I love my Margie. I love my new trap gun that I go trap shooting with. I love garlic and chicken pizza. And I loved our cat Dumbledore when he was with us. 4 different objects, all that I love, but obviously of different magnitudes. Well, the ancient Greeks had a better fit for this. They had 4 words for love. The first one was eros, romantic love, which is probably what we think of mostly when we think of the word love. The second is storge. That means the love of family. There's people that we're connected to by blood or relationships or extended family. The other one is philia, love of friends. Our city of Philadelphia, that's where it got its name, love of friends, people that we like being around. And lastly, agape, which is capable of acting in a hostile environment where there's no warm, fuzzy feelings. Agape love is capable of acting in a hostile environment where there are no warm, fuzzy feelings. It's interesting when Jesus used the commandment that you love your neighbor as you love yourself. The Greek New Testament uses the word agape. So agape your neighbor as you agape yourself. And I find it interesting how Spirit weaves these things together. Our daily word for today had that quote from Leviticus. And that's where Jesus probably picked it up. Remember, he was a Jewish rabbi. Love your neighbor as yourself. Agape your neighbor as you agape yourself. So using that type of love that is capable of acting in a hostile environment where there's no warm, fuzzy feelings. Well, tomorrow we get to celebrate Valentine's Day. So how did Valentine's Day come about? I like to look at stuff that shows up in our life and say, how did it get here? There are several different things that showed up. And there was one that said people believed this was the time of the year when birds choose their mate. Yeah, okay. Also, there was a Roman festival called Februaria, which is how we got the name for the month of February. And also Lupercalia, which was a feast of or a festival for fertility and bounty. And you can imagine what types of activities they would have for fertility. But our actual name of Valentine's Day comes from a Roman priest back in 270 Common Era, who was arrested by the Roman authorities and placed into prison because he was secretly marrying Christians, which was against the emperor's edict. Well, everything was going along fine, and apparently the Roman empires used to like to visit the prisons and see who they had locked up there. Well, Valentinus made a tactical error. He decided to convert the emperor, Claudius the Goth, and Claudius didn't take a liking to that. He decided he needed to be executed, put to death for doing that. So he was stoned and beaten, and finally he lost his head. But the legends say that before his execution, he healed the blind daughter of the jailer. And another legend says that the night before his execution, he penned a note to the jailer's daughter saying, with love, your Valentine or Valentinus. So that's where they get the idea of Valentine sending and stuff. It wasn't until the early 400s that the Catholic Pope made the holiday, or made this a holy day, to honor the martyred saint, Saint Valentine. And it was several centuries later where this got into the expressions of doing romantic love and sending cards out. Now, the latest data that I found at Hallmark, 180 million cards are bought up for Valentine's Day. This is the second most card giving holiday of the year. And interestingly, 50% of them are bought 6 days before Valentine's Day. It's a procrastinator's delight, and I was reflecting on Valentine cards. In fact, when I was very first married, I was a 23-year-old Coast Guardsman. My wife and I were living in Glen Burnie, Maryland. Valentine's Day comes around, and I figured, hey, we're married. We don't have to do that stuff. Wrong. I sat down at breakfast that morning, and there's this Valentine card and a little gift in front of my place, and there is nothing in front of hers. I went, oh no, I knew I'd messed up. Well, she told her mom, and I think her mom said, you told his mom. So she did. And I got a call from my mom, and I got a dressing down from my mom. It was more severe than any chief petty officer ever gave me as a young Coast Guardsman. She says, your father never did that. You always remember these cards. These are important. I said, yes, Mom. Yes, Mom. So from then on, I would buy 2 cards. One to my wife, and a second one, to my sweetheart, to my girlfriend, a little mushy one. Well, I was coming home one Christmas, and I think my spouse had flown ahead of me, and I flew back to Chicago from Baltimore, Maryland, and I was wearing my sailor suit and, the little crackerjack thing, and I had my pea coat on, my hat under my thing, and my brother-in-law and I, at the time, stopped at the drugstore in Oak Park, Illinois, and to buy these 2 cards for Christmas, because I hadn't picked them up yet. So I go in there and I'm looking through, and I find one to my wife. And I find the other one to my sweetheart, So I walk up to the register, and there's these 2 gals standing behind the register, and set the cards down. They pick them up, and they look at it, and they're both looking at the cards, to my wife, to my girlfriend, or whatever, and put them in a sack. And as I turned to leave with my little sailor suit on, this one turns to the other, she says, those sailors are something else, See, these 2 gals thought it was for 2 different women. A sailor has a girl in every port, but they didn't realize it's for the same person. So, and it's interesting about Saint Valentine too. The Catholic Church loves to assign certain tasks to these patron saints. And when I was growing up, Saint Jude was my favorite patron saint. He was the saint, the patron saint for hopeless cases. So you can see where my consciousness was way back then. And the Roman Catholic Church made St. Valentine the patron saint of engaged couples, beekeepers, people with epilepsy or fainting spells, greetings, happy marriages, love and lovers, plague, travelers, and young people. Wow. So anyhow, that's St. Valentine and what he's the patron saint of. And an interesting thing too, how this talk gets weaved together. Today's talk is about compassion, and tomorrow's word is love, the daily word for love. And, both are connected to bring harmony in our world. Compassion for other people, and expressing this love, this binding force that brings us together. Dr. Gary Chapman, who is a counselor for over 30 years in counseling couples, discovered that there are certain ways in which people express love. He called it the love languages. And everyone has a primary love language that we express our love. And an interesting thing, people are drawn to someone who has a different love language. So apparently this opposite attracts saying is working. And the way you tell about a person's love language is the way that they give love. And these 5 love languages are acts of service, receiving gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch, and quality time. Acts of service, receiving gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch, and quality time. So when we look at the Bible story of Mary and Martha, you know, Jesus had stopped by their house, and Martha was in the kitchen fixing the stuff up, the food, and Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet. And of course, Martha comes in and says, "Hey, Lord, tell my sister to get out here and help me in the kitchen." And Jesus says, "Hey, your sister has chosen the better." So these 2 gals, you know, Martha was into acts of service. Mary was into quality time. And there's one verse in the Bible that Jesus is recorded as saying to Martha, saying, "Martha, Martha, thou art busy about many things." And when I was growing up in grammar school, Reverend Monsignor Roan, who was at head of our diocese at St. Lucy's Diocese on the west side of Chicago, he would come up every month and pass out our report cards. And there was a girl who is in my class, Martha McNally, who is my little heartthrob. And he would always say, "Martha, Martha, thou art busy about many things." So I learned a Bible verse as growing up in this Catholic school. There's a story in the book, The Story of Unity by James Dillard Freeman, about Myrtle Fillmore and this big Irishman named Caskey. Caskey had something wrong with his legs, and he was walking with crutches. And he had seen Myrtle as a neighbor and how she had changed, and he was going over there to get healed. And she had to keep working and working with him. And finally, he says, "Put those crutches down and walk, you know, tell yourself you can do this." And he did. And, you know, years later, Lowell Fillmore was in Kansas City, and a Teamster truck drove, one of those horse-drawn things, drove over, jumped down, and he says, "Aren't you Lowell Fillmore?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Aren't you Mr. Caskey, our former leader?" He said, "Yeah." Well, here he is, still healed and running around. So it's interesting, Myrtle Fillmore and Caskey had to make a shift in how they did love. Myrtle was a sickly child. He had been told she was sickly, and that's how she received gift as she was growing up, by being cared for. And when she heard those life-changing words from this lecturer, a metaphysical lecturer, that you're a child of God, you do not inherit sickness, she began to use words of affirmation to her own body. So she shifted from receiving gifts to affirmations, and she was healed of several maladies. Caskey had to do the same thing. He was receiving gifts from Myrtle, and then he had to take those affirmations and take them to his own thing and move on to that. So I also came across another act of service that really resonated with me. In the Sacramento Bee, about a week or so ago, there was an article about Charles McGee. Charles McGee was a Black man, and he was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. And Charles McGee passed on January 17th. He was 102 years old. And it just spoke to my heart. Here he was a career airman. He was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen. He had flown 409 combat missions during 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And it's a record today that's in the Aviation Hall of Fame or whatever, 409 combat missions. You know, he retired as a colonel, and when on his 100th birthday, they gave him an honorary promotion to brigadier general. And to celebrate his 100th birthday, he flew a private jet from Frederick, Maryland to Dover Air Force Base. At one of the State of the Union messages, he was given a standing ovation. So to me, General McGee talked about acts of service. He stayed in the military, being a black man in Alabama in 1943, going through this special program. He had to probably put up with a lot of stuff, not only in the military itself, but around the local base area. But he stayed with the service, and he risked his life for 409 combat missions. And he is quoted as saying, "I am most proud of my work as a Tuskegee Airman that helped bring down racial barriers and defeat the Nazis." Wow, acts of service. So what is our life mission? I think the life mission for General McGee was, he was to stay in the Army and show that black aviators were just as good and even better than some of the white ones, and break down this racial barrier thing. So what is our mission in life? And it's interesting, our spiritual goal for today was spiritual growth. And I see that as our mission in life, spiritual growth. I think that's why we're in Unity. We want to grow spiritually. And there's actually 4 phases as we come into our spiritual growth. The first one is to me. Oh, to me. Woe is me. Everything's happened. I'm woeing around in my little boat. Everything's happening to me. Woe is me. I'm a victim. Then the next stage up is by me. We realize that we have this power, and thanks for that song about power, that we can make a difference in the world. Growing up a bit, and we can do this by me. Then the third stage is the kind of the fulfillment stage. It's through me. There's a huge difference between by me and through me. We realize that Spirit is working through me. When I was working at Silent Unity, when I was back in ministerial school, they had these plaques on the wall in different rooms, and it said, "Not I, but the Christ within. Not I, but the Christ within." When we were speaking to these callers from all over the world, it was the Christ speaking through us, speaking to the Christ and those other people that helped them heal, help them whatever. It wasn't us personally, because they would get these letters occasionally about people being healed and whatever, and they realized it's not me, but the Christ within doing the work. And then the fourth stage, the highest one of our spiritual growth, is as me. As me. Jesus has said, look at me, look at God. God is love. I am love. So that is the highest of the thing. The 4 stages. And it's not something that changes immediately. The talks I've read of Mr. Fillmore's last week talked about, we don't change our consciousness just like that. It takes a while to move through this. And it's a daily thing, sometimes moment to moment, as we move through to me, by me, through me, as me. Eleanor Roosevelt said, when we're in a relationship, it's usually with someone else. And she had said, understanding is a two-way street. Understanding is a two-way street. So if we're in a relationship with another person, and most of us are, and we're in a relationship with other people in the world, it's a two-way street, helping to understand and listen to other people. And guess what? It takes time. I recently got to celebrate an anniversary of this organization that I belong to. And Margie and I have often talked about elastic time. Sometimes time just drags on by. Oh my God, this is ever going to end. And other times it's flying by with lightning speed. It's a little bit like the Chinese bamboo plant. On the first year, it grows 2 inches. The second year, it grows 2 inches. Same for the third and the fourth year, only grows 2 inches. But on the 5th year, it shoots up 80 feet. So I think as we move on in our spiritual growth, we inch on along 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, and all of a sudden, boom, man, we realize I've really come. And we got to remember, it's not I, but the Christ within. And I think this growth is also impacted by our human nature. I read recently that our human nature is 98% emotional, 2% rational. 98% emotional, 2% rational. So when there's a little conflict in our physical activity, we can get anxiety. And we can also feel insecurity. Stuff's not going our way, and we get anxious and we feel insecure. And the way around this is, we have a choice. We can either be reactive or we can be reflective. And if we don't make a choice, not making a choice is actually making a choice. And the choice that defaults to reactive, we react. And it's something that we need to practice. It doesn't happen all at once. And the more we practice about being reflective, we get to use that 2% of our rational minds and make good decisions. And we get to use our powers of compassion and love, like today's word for our daily word, compassion, and tomorrow's for love. The title of the talk is Let's Use Our Good China. Let's use our good China. And came from a saying I come across that said, use the good China every day, as today is all that matters. Use the good China today, every day, as today is all that matters. And like Gina was talking about earlier, staying in the now. And I think if we probably have stuff we haven't used around the house, and, are we saving it for a special day? Well, what about pulling that stuff out and using it? Because that kind of sends a message to ourselves that, hey, we are special. And perhaps we can use it with another special person on Valentine's Day. And power. Thanks for that song, Lon. What about our power? Power is also one of our 12 powers. It's in our throat, and the Apostle Philip. We get to use our power through our voice. And as human beings, we are subject to our preferences. We like a certain thing, and that's the things that we choose. And one thing we do is have a control over how we choose this. And remember, we do this by our thoughts. Our third unity principle, our thoughts are creative. And if some of this talk is kind of like saying, all right, Reverend Bob, maybe, is there some things I need to change? Do I need to change it? Well, when do we need to change? Sometimes certain events come in our life that we say, let's change. A new month, a new year, the New Year's resolutions, which are probably all fallen by the wayside by now. But we don't have to wait for some other thing. We can begin again today. In 12-step programs, they talk about starting your day anew anytime. You don't have to wait till the next morning. You can start again. My day starts again at 10:46 a.m. this morning. So, and making that choice sends a positive message to us. It's a mental shift that allows us to clean the slate and approach everything with fresh eyes, that we can make that choice at any time. And starting new is powerful when we focus our attention on what do we want, not on what we don't want. Just like making affirmations, we affirm what we want. We don't affirm a negative thing. And there's no need to get down on ourselves that things are not coming so quick. Because remember Charles Fillmore's words, we don't change our consciousness immediately. It takes time. So there's a horseman that I used to go for his training, and his line was, take the time it takes, and it takes less time. He says, most people quit with their horse 5 minutes before the horse is ready to learn it. He says, just hang in there a little longer. Take the time it takes, and it takes its own time. And we get to choose that time, and we get to use that energy. So let's kind of wrap this up today. What are we talking about? We talked about some definitions and meanings of love and this complex power and emotion. And we showed how love is expressed in some of the love languages. We looked at the steps in spiritual growth. And then we looked at our life mission and the time that is available and how it can seem like we're not making progress, and all of a sudden, boom, shoot up like that Chinese bamboo. And tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So it's a perfect time to not only honor those that we love in our life, but also look at the ways that we are loving ourselves. And are we using the good China today? Namaste, dear ones. Let's take a step back in time and go into our meditative and reflection part of our service. So I invite you to sit comfortably on your chair. If you like, you can close your eyes or let your vision be softly forward, focusing on nothing but seeing everything, especially these beautiful faces on our computer screen. Bring our awareness to our breath. Notice the gentle rise and fall of our chest as we breathe in and breathe out. Thich Nhat Hanh book I was reading talked about we're doing a mantra like breathing in peace, breathing out calm. I breathe in peace, I breathe out calm. Now let's follow our next breath down into our heart center. Perhaps we can feel the gentle beating of our heart in our heart center. Our heart, this wonderful physical organ that represents love in our culture, and it sends blood to every part of our being. So if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit, I invite you to picture in your mind's eye love-filled blood flowing from our heart center to that particular area of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit. And see that area bathed in a blue, white, light bubble of healing energy. And if there's any person, place, thing, or event in our life that needs that healing hand of spirit, I invite you to see it very clearly in your mind's eye. And then see this person, this place, this thing, this event bathed in this blue-white bubble of spiritual healing light, bringing about the right and perfect solution at the right and perfect time and in the right and perfect way. When Jesus of Nazareth was asked by his disciples, saying, Lord, teach us how to pray, he told them to go within to the closet of their being, to shut the door to the outside world and listen to the Father who speaks in a small, still voice, but rewards openly. So we've gone to the closet of our being, our heart center. We mentally shut the door to the outside world. Then we focus our attention on our heart center. We listen for a small, still voice, or perhaps images floating across the screen of our mind, or thoughts flitting through our mind as we gently rest in the silence. And I'll ring our gong 3 times and go into an extended period of silence. And now we bring our awareness back to our physical bodies. We become aware of our pressure of our feet on the floor, pressure of our body against our chairs, the temperature of the air on our exposed skin. And perhaps in our time of silence, we heard something like a small, still voice, or thoughts flitting across our mind, or images flashing across the screen of our mind, or perhaps not. But we have made ourselves open and available to Spirit. Perhaps later today, an email from a friend, a movie we're watching, a book we're reading, a call from a loved one will give us an idea of what Spirit is calling us to do as we move forward in our spiritual growth. So now we open our eyes, we become fully present, and we get to sing our Alleluias